Friends, thank you for being here today. We find ourselves at a moment in history that future generations will study with a mixture of awe and disbelief. We are living through days that will be written about in textbooks a century from now, days that will define the very durability of the American experiment. If you're feeling a sense of unease, a sense that the ground beneath our feet is shifting in ways we do not fully understand, you are not alone. The atmosphere in Washington, D.C., and indeed across the entire nation, is heavy. It is charged with the static electricity of a coming storm. We are not merely witnessing a political scandal or a legal skirmish. We are witnessing a fundamental collision between the unstoppable force of the rule of law and the immovable object of a former president's defiance. Before we go any further, I want to hear from you. Do you feel this shift in the atmosphere where you are? Let me know in the comments. Are you feeling anxious about the next few days? Or do you think the system will hold? For years, we have watched the slow-motion car crash of legal challenges, political rallies, and courtroom dramas. We have become accustomed to the noise, the breaking news alerts, the constant churn of allegations and denials. It is easy, after so much time, to become numb to it all. It is easy to think, well, this is just another news cycle. This too shall pass. But I'm here to tell you, with as much clarity and seriousness as I can muster, that what has happened in the last 48 hours is different. This is not business as usual. This is the moment where the dam finally breaks. We are gathered here to make sense of a situation that is moving faster than cable news can track. We need to slow down, take a deep breath, and look at the facts. Not the rumors, not the spin, but the hard, documented facts that have turned Washington into a fortress and sent a former president into a spiral of panic. We need to understand why a federal judge took an unprecedented step, why members of Congress are defecting from their party in droves, and why the National Guard is currently patrolling the streets of our capital. To understand where we are today, Monday, January 12th, we must look back to the afternoon of Saturday, January 10th. It was a cold, gray afternoon in Washington, the kind of day that usually passes without note in the judicial calendar. But inside the E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse, history was being written. At exactly 3:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan did something that no federal judge in the 250-year history of this republic has ever done. She did not merely issue a ruling. She did not merely schedule a hearing. She issued a formal criminal referral directly to the United States House of Representatives. Now, for those of us who haven't spent our lives in law school, let's pause and appreciate the magnitude of that action. Usually, the judiciary and the legislature stay in their own lanes. Judges try cases, Congress writes laws and handles impeachment. There's a wall of separation between them. On Saturday, Judge Chutkan saw something so dangerous, so immediate, and so threatening to the administration of justice that she reached across that separation and handed Congress the keys to impeachment. She didn't do this lightly. This wasn't a snap decision made in anger. This was the culmination of months of defiance. The referral document, a searing 47-page filing, paints a picture of a defendant, Donald J. Trump, who has ceased to participate in the legal process in good faith and has instead declared war on the court itself. The referral cites a systematic pattern of behavior, and that phrase is crucial. In the eyes of the law, anyone can have a bad day. Anyone can make a mistake. But a systematic pattern implies design. It implies intent. It implies that the obstruction of justice was not an accident, but a strategy. Judge Chutkan confirmed that the former president had violated his court-imposed gag order not once, not twice, but 14 times in the span of 3 months. Think about that. 14 times a judge said, do not do this. And 14 times the former president did it anyway. In any other courtroom in America, a defendant who violated a gag order 14 times would be in a jail cell. But because of the complexities of his status as a former president and a current candidate, the system bent. It stretched. It accommodated. Until Saturday. On Saturday, Judge Chutkan declared that the bending was over. She wrote that his behavior constituted a clear and present danger to the administration of justice. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. This was a signal flare fired into the heart of Congress. It was a message that said, the courts can no longer manage this man alone. The Constitution requires you to act. I want to get your temperature on this specific point. Do you agree with Judge Chutkan's decision to involve Congress? Did she have any other choice after 14 violations to type yes if you support the referral, or no if you think she overstepped? When the referral hit the desks of the House Judiciary Committee, it wasn't just a letter. It was, as legal analysts are calling it, a roadmap. In previous impeachment inquiries, think back to the Ukraine phone call or even the aftermath of January 6th, there was always a fog of war. There were competing narratives. People could say, well, he didn't mean it that way, or that's just hearsay, or we don't know what was in his heart. Judge Chutkan removed the fog. She turned on the floodlights. The 47-page document attached to the referral is devastating because it eliminates the defense of ignorance. It eliminates plausible deniability. It includes the time-stamped violations. The document lists, with forensic precision, every single gag order violation. It shows the time of the post, the content of the post, and the specific court order it violated. It creates a timeline of defiance that is impossible to dispute. The direct warnings. It includes transcripts from 7 separate contempt hearings. We can read the words of the judge warning Trump explicitly and clearly that further violations would result in severe consequences. He cannot claim he didn't know. He cannot claim the orders were vague. He was told to his face 7 times, and 7 times he walked out of the courtroom and did it again. The campaign of intimidation. This is where the case turns dark. The evidence includes direct messages sent to witnesses. It includes phone records, metadata that never lies, proving coordination with co-defendants who were under strict no-contact orders. It shows a concerted effort to shape testimony, to silence critics, and to frighten the jury pool. This isn't just complaining about a trial. This is rigging the game. The smoking gun. Perhaps most damaging of all are the recorded conversations. In an era of surveillance, it seems almost impossible that we would have audio of a former president discussing how to defy a court order, but here we are. The referral references recordings where Trump discusses defying the court with his advisors. These recordings prove mens rea, guilty mind. They prove he knew it was wrong, he knew it was illegal, and he planned to do it anyway. The internal admissions. Finally, the judge included emails from Trump's own legal team. These are emails where his lawyers acknowledge the violations, discussing the damage control. When your own lawyers are emailing each other saying, "We have a problem, he violated the order again," there is no defense left to mount. This evidence is not partisan. It didn't come from the Democratic National Committee. It didn't come from a rival campaign. It came from a federal docket, certified by a judge, stamped with the seal of the United States District Court. That gives it a weight, a gravity that no political attack ad could ever hope to achieve. For years, the Republican Party has held together through controversies that would have ended any other political movement. There was a belief in Washington that the bond between Trump and the GOP base was unbreakable, and therefore, the bond between Trump and GOP lawmakers was unbreakable. They feared his primary challenges more than they feared history. But on Saturday night, the math changed. Before Judge Chutkan's referral, the articles of impeachment languishing in the House had 87 co-sponsors. They were all Democrats. It looked like a partisan exercise, destined to fail. By Sunday morning, that number had exploded. As of this broadcast, there are 231 co-sponsors. Let that number sink in. 231. That is well over the 218 needed for a majority. It means that impeachment is not a possibility. It is a mathematical certainty. What happened? Why did the dam break now? It broke because of the moderate Republicans. Representatives from swing districts, places in New York, California, Nebraska, and Virginia that Biden won in 2020, looked at that 47-page referral and realized they had no cover left. They could not go back to their districts and tell suburban voters that obstructing justice is acceptable because the defendant is a Republican. Representative Mike Lawler of New York and Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska became the faces of this shift. These are men who have defended the former president in the past, who have voted against previous inquiries. But when faced with a federal judge's formal referral, they flipped. They went on television and said, quite simply, "I took an oath to the Constitution, not to a man. When a judge says there is a clear and present danger to justice, I have to listen." This shattered the narrative of a witch hunt. You cannot call it a partisan witch hunt when your own party members are signing the warrant. Recognizing the urgency, Democratic leadership invoked Rule 99, Section 2. This is a rarely used procedural mechanism designed for national emergencies. It bypasses the usual committee hearings and debates that can drag on for weeks. It forces a mandatory floor vote within 72 hours. That clock is ticking right now. The vote is scheduled for Monday, January 13th, tomorrow. What is your take on these Republicans flipping sides? Do you see Lawler and Bacon as patriots putting the country first, or do you view them as betraying their party? This is a huge debate right now, and I want to see your perspective in the comments. While Congress crunched the numbers, a different scene was unfolding at Mar-a-Lago. We are witnessing something we have rarely seen from Donald Trump, genuine, uncontrolled panic. For decades, Donald Trump's superpower has been delay. He knows how to use the legal system against itself. You file a motion, you appeal the ruling, you ask for a stay, you sue the prosecutor, you run out the clock until the other side runs out of money or the voters lose interest. It is a strategy of attrition, and he is the master of it. But Judge Chutkan's referral short-circuited the machine. By handing the case to Congress with a clear and present danger designation, she moved the timeline from the slow, deliberate pace of the courts to the rapid-fire pace of a political emergency. Impeachment doesn't require appeals courts. It doesn't require lengthy discovery periods when the evidence is already presented. It happens now. Trump realized, likely around 4 p.m. on Saturday, that he had lost control of time. He cannot fundraise his way out of a floor vote tomorrow. He cannot rally his way out of a referral that is already public record. His response has been erratic and dangerous. Since the news broke, his Truth Social account has been a torrent of all-caps rage. But if you look closely at the posts, the tone has shifted. It isn't just the usual complaints about rigged systems. It is darker. He is calling for military tribunals. He is ranting about deep state coups. And then, the post that changed everything. The post that turned this from a political crisis into a national security event. He wrote, "If Congress moves forward, patriots must converge on Washington. The Second Amendment exists for moments like this. We have to be very clear about what that is. That is not political rhetoric. That is not a campaign slogan. In the context of a looming impeachment vote, that is an implicit instruction. It is an invocation of armed resistance against a constitutional process. Legal scholars and national security experts immediately flagged it as potential seditious conspiracy and incitement to violence. It was this post, more than the referral, more than the transcripts, that caused the mood in Washington to shift from concern to alarm. I have to ask, how did you feel when you saw that post? When a former president invokes the Second Amendment in this context, do you see it as free speech, or do you see it as a direct threat to safety? Be honest with me below. If you were to walk through downtown Washington, D.C. today, you would not recognize it as the capital of a free democracy during peacetime. You would think you were in a zone of conflict. The government took Trump's Truth Social post literally. They are not making the mistake they made on January 6th, 2021. They are not assuming it is just bluster. The National Guard has been fully mobilized. Camouflaged Humvees are parked at intersections that are usually filled with tourists and lobbyists. Soldiers with rifles stand guard at the metro stations near the Capitol complex. Steel barricades, 7 feet high, non-scalable, have been erected in a perimeter around the Capitol building, the Supreme Court, and the White House. The city has been partitioned. Streets are closed. The hum of traffic has been replaced by the sound of sirens and the heavy thrum of helicopters circling overhead. There is a palpable tension on the ground. Pro-Trump demonstrators, answering the call, have begun to gather near the National Mall. They are angry. They feel betrayed. They believe the narrative that their leader is being persecuted. Opposite them, near the Supreme Court, counter-protesters are assembling. They are demanding accountability. They are holding signs reading, "No one is above the law." Between these two groups stands a massive law enforcement presence. FBI field offices are on high alert. Intelligence agencies are monitoring encrypted chat rooms and far-right militia channels, looking for the signals of coordinated violence. They are preparing for a January 6th-style attack. But this time, the element of surprise is gone. The fortress is built. The question is whether the walls will hold. So, what happens now? We are standing on the precipice of the next 72 hours, a window of time that will determine the fate of the presidency and the stability of the republic. Several accountability mechanisms are converging at once, creating a pressure cooker environment. First, the impeachment vote. As I noted, the House will vote tomorrow. Trump will be impeached for a third time. That is a certainty. The only question remains the margin. Will it be a narrow victory, or will it be a landslide? If the number of Republican defectors grows, if it goes from 15 to 30 to 50, it sends a message to the Senate that the party has officially broken with Trump. Second, the Senate trial. Once impeached, the action moves to the Senate. A trial is mandatory. In the past, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has held the line, keeping his caucus together to acquit. But reports from the cloakrooms suggest McConnell is furious. He sees Trump-esque threats of violence, threats that endanger McConnell's own colleagues, as a bridge too far. Conviction in the Senate requires 67 votes. It has always been viewed as impossible. But in this environment, with the National Guard outside and a 47-page criminal referral on the desk, the impossible is starting to look plausible. Third, the 25th Amendment. While the public focuses on Congress, there is a quieter, perhaps more urgent conversation happening within the executive branch. Reports indicate that cabinet officials and Vice President Vance are having active discussions about the 25th Amendment. This amendment allows for the removal of a president or a candidate who holds office if they are deemed unfit to discharge their duties. Trump's erratic behavior, his calls for violence, and his apparent detachment from reality have brought this option onto the table. It is the nuclear option, but it is being discussed. Fourth, criminal exposure. Finally, let us not forget the courts. Judge Chutkan did not just send her evidence to Congress. She sent it to the Department of Justice. Prosecutors are reviewing the files now. Charges for subornation of perjury, which is the legal term for pressuring a witness to lie, could be filed at any moment. Trump is facing the prospect of fighting a Senate trial and a new federal indictment simultaneously. Let's do a quick poll in the chat. Do you think the Senate will actually reach 67 votes for conviction this time? Give me a yes or no and tell me why. Before we conclude, we must step back and look at the broader canvas. We must widen our aperture beyond the vote counts and the legal filings to understand the tectonic shifts occurring beneath the surface of American life. The events of the next 72 hours are not merely about the political survival of one man, they are about the psychological and institutional survival of the nation itself. We often look to history for a guide, but in this instance, history offers no perfect parallel. We talk about Watergate, about Nixon's resignation in 1974, but the mechanics here are fundamentally different. When Richard Nixon resigned, he did so because his own party's elders, Goldwater, Rhodes, Scott, walked to the White House and told him the truth. His support had evaporated. It was a political intervention. It was a party policing its own. Today we are seeing something else entirely. We are seeing a judicial intervention forcing the political hand. The Republican Party did not abandon Trump because of a moral awakening. They are fracturing because a federal judge presented irrefutable evidence of ongoing criminality. This distinction matters. It means the immune system of the Constitution is working, but it is working under extreme duress. It is the courts, not the caucus, that are serving as the final guardrail. This places an immense, perhaps unfair burden on the judiciary, a branch of government designed to be reactive, not proactive. By effectively forcing Congress to act, Judge Chutkan has altered the balance of power in Washington forever. She has established a precedent that no president, current or former, can use the bully pulpit to silence the gavel. But the crisis is not confined to the marble halls of D.C. It is bleeding into our living rooms, our workplaces, and our communities. The polarization we have lived with for a decade has hardened into something more brittle, more dangerous. Across the country tonight, there are two distinct realities colliding. In one reality, millions of Americans are watching the news with a sense of relief, believing that finally, after years of perceived impunity, the rule of law is asserting itself. They see the National Guard not as an occupying force, but as a necessary shield for democracy. They look at the 47-page referral and see vindication, proof that the system works. In the other reality, fueled by the former president's frantic posts and an ecosystem of alternative media, millions of other Americans see a coup in progress. They do not see a judge upholding the law. They see a deep state operative stripping their leader of his rights. They view the National Guard as a symbol of tyranny. When Trump invokes the Second Amendment, they do not hear a threat. They hear a call to duty. This cognitive split is the true crisis. A country cannot survive indefinitely when its citizens do not merely disagree on policy, but disagree on the basic nature of reality. The panic we describe in Washington is mirrored by a quiet dread in the suburbs and rural towns. Neighbors are eyeing neighbors with suspicion. Families are fractured. The fear of civil unrest is no longer the plot of a dystopian novel. It is a conversation happening at dinner tables. The psychological toll of this sustained chaos, the Trump fatigue, mixed with genuine anxiety about violence, is exhausting the national spirit. We are a tired nation, and tired nations are vulnerable. We must also consider the institutions that are holding the line. The Department of Justice, the FBI, the Secret Service, and the military are currently undergoing the ultimate stress test. These agencies are designed to be apolitical, but they are being dragged into the center of the partisan arena. Consider the position of the military leadership. When the former president calls for patriots to converge and implies the use of arms, the Pentagon is placed in an impossible bind. They must defend the Constitution, which includes protecting the government from insurrection while navigating the treacherous waters of civil-military relations. The mobilization of the National Guard is a sign of readiness, yes, but it is also a sign of failure of civil politics to resolve conflict without the display of force. Similarly, the Secret Service is in a paradox. They are sworn to protect the life of the former president, yet that very protectee is the source of the threat against the government they serve. They are guarding a man who is actively inciting against the institutions that pay their salaries. This internal institutional friction is unsustainable. It corrodes morale and invites mistakes. The fact that these institutions have held so far is a testament to the professionalism of the civil servants within them, but we cannot take their resilience for granted forever. Finally, we cannot ignore the global dimension. While we stare at our screens in Washington, the world is watching us. America's adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, are looking at the images of steel barricades around the U.S. Capitol with gleeful opportunism. To them, this is not just an American crisis, it is a geopolitical opportunity. A distracted, divided America is a weakened America. When the U.S. president, or a former president who leads a major party, threatens armed resistance, it validates every piece of anti-democratic propaganda Beijing and Moscow have ever produced. They are telling their citizens, look at the chaos of democracy. Look at their instability. This is why you need a strong man. Our allies, conversely, are watching with horror. In London, Paris, Tokyo, and Berlin, frantic diplomatic cables are being sent. They're asking, is the U.S. stable? Can we rely on their treaties? Is their nuclear command and control secure amidst this chaos? The stability of the global order relies, in large part, on the assumption of American continuity. That assumption is shaking. If the U.S. descends into prolonged civil strife or constitutional paralysis, the vacuum left on the world stage will be filled by powers that do not share our values. The ripple effects of what happens in the House of Representatives tomorrow will be felt in Taiwan, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and beyond. If you are joining us from outside the United States, I'm very curious to hear your view. Does America look broken to you right now? Drop your flag or your country in the comments and let us know what the world is thinking. Ultimately, what we are witnessing is the violent death of an illusion. For the better part of a decade, a significant portion of the American electorate, and indeed the political class, operated under the illusion that norms were self-enforcing. We believed that shame was a political force. We believed that certain lines would never be crossed because it just isn't done. Judge Chutkan's referral proves that norms are not enough. It proves that when a political figure is willing to burn down the house to rule the ashes, only the hard, cold steel of the law can stop them. The illusion that we can move on without accountability is gone. The illusion that we can appease a movement built on obstruction is gone. We are now in the realm of hard choices and hard consequences. The panic we see in Donald Trump is the panic of a man who has spent a lifetime slipping through the cracks of the system, only to find that the cracks have been sealed. It is the realization that the rhetorical magic tricks no longer work in a courtroom, and now, thanks to the referral, they no longer work in Congress. This is the reckoning in its truest sense, not just a punishment, but a settling of accounts, a forcing of the truth into the light. And while the immediate danger is high, the threat of violence is real, the lockdown is necessary, there is a strange kind of clarity in this moment. We are no longer pretending. We are no longer sleepwalking. We are awake, and we are facing the monster in the room. The next 72 hours will be terrifying, yes, but they will also be clarifying. They will determine whether the United States is a nation of laws or a nation of men. And that is a question that was always going to have to be answered, sooner or later. It seems history has decided the time is now. Friends, we are in uncharted waters. The old maps do not apply here. The norms and traditions that usually guide our politics have been burned away, leaving only the raw machinery of the Constitution. For years, Donald Trump operated under the illusion that he was untouchable. He believed that his popularity was a shield that could deflect any law, any rule, any judge. He believed that he could bend reality to his will through sheer force of personality. But the law is patient, it is slow, it is grinding, but it is relentless. What we are seeing this week is the law catching up. The illusion is shattering, the evidence is locked in, the vote is scheduled, the National Guard is at the post. The machinery of the Constitution is moving, and it is moving faster than Trump can obstruct it. We do not know exactly how this week will end. We do not know if there will be violence or if the peace will hold. We do not know if the Senate will finally convict. But we do know this. The United States of America is being tested. We are finding out, in real time, if our institutions are strong enough to withstand the fury of one man who refuses to yield to the rule of law. Hold your loved ones close, stay informed, watch the sources, not the noise. And remember that history is not just something that happens to other people in other times. It is happening right here, right now, to us. Thank you for reading and being part of this community. If you found this analysis helpful, please share it. We need to keep the conversation based on facts, not fear. I'll be reading the comments in the first hour, so please share your thoughts below. Stay safe, everyone.